part of the style, though? It's a government, a prime minister of dramatic gesture, almost dropping bombshells.
Yeah, it does seem to be, but it gets you into, I mean, how many times has world-class test and trace system being quoted back to him? It gets you into trouble unless you are confident of what you're going to deliver. Maybe it's a learning process, or maybe the style will stay. What works in campaigning doesn't necessarily work in government.
But something like a willingness to breach international law is not down to inexperience. They knew what they were doing. It's intentional.
That's a fair point. And I have to say, frankly, that was the most extraordinary thing that in 40 years of public service, now finished, I've ever heard of the dispatch box. When I was in government, if you were writing advice for ministers and it had legal implications, it was a golden rule, an unbreakable rule, that you would go to either the departmental legal advisors or, if you're at the centre, you go to the Cabinet Office people and clear your submission, clear your advice. And if they said it breached either domestic or international law, or even got close to it, you had to go away, tear it up and rewrite it. It was one of our calling cards as a government. It's one of the things we stood for in international relations, and we've criticised other governments for breaching international law. And so to go out there and say, we are going to do this, and that's fine, isn't it? Really knocked me back. I was just astonished. And personally, since I can, outside government, I can speak frankly, I think it's a bad thing. And it's not just risking our international reputation, risking people's willingness to do deals with us in future, but it's putting specifically at risk both an EU-UK free trade deal and a US-UK free trade deal, as Nancy Pelosi has made clear. So whatever they're doing it for, does it really stack up against all the disadvantages?
Or will it have consequences? Because hasn't President Trump showed the way that he can walk away from an international treaty, people can be shocked and horrified, and not much happens?
Yeah, but if we want a free trade deal, that has to be ratified in both houses of Congress. And the Democrats won the House of Representatives back in 2018. And not many observers think it'll be up for grabs again in November, but not many observers think that the Republicans will retake the House of Representatives. So when Nancy Pelosi issues her ultimatum, it has teeth, because they can block a free trade deal for as long as they want to. It doesn't get endorsement in the House of Representatives, it doesn't happen.
Do you think in some senses Boris Johnson is following President Trump's advice on how to negotiate?
That's a good question. I just remember when he was Foreign Secretary, he made a speech to a private gathering, but inevitably got leaked, because these things do get leaked, saying that if President Trump had been negotiating Brexit, this was a moment when he was kind of unhappy with the way that the May government was negotiating Brexit. He said if Trump was negotiating it, he would make some outrageous demands right at the beginning and some threats and set some crazy deadlines, and there'd be a huge row and there'd be chaos. And then somewhere down the track, he might get a very good deal. And I would just say that in some respects, the way the government is approaching negotiations on a post-Brexit future trade deal with the EU sounds a bit like that. It has similarities with the way that the president conducts some of his international negotiations.
Do you think Boris Johnson admires President Trump?
I think that on the policy agenda, they're in very different places. Trump's government is genuinely disruptive, and I think that Boris Johnson's government wants to be genuinely radical, though it's not quite clear what that means in substance. And I think that Boris Johnson finds the Trump phenomenon fascinating. We all do, because this is a man who was a businessman of mixed record, ran for the most powerful office on the planet, and won. And that's an extraordinary story. And so, not surprising, any politician would wonder, how did he do that? Is there anything I can learn from it?